There are places on this planet that feel less like parts of Earth and more like breaches in it. Places so strange, so extreme, and so visually impossible that even the people living nearest to them still struggle to accept that they are real. Not hidden behind military fences, not buried under desert sand, not locked away in legend, but out in the open, under the same sky as the rest of us, quietly defying everything we think a landscape is supposed to be. Some were shaped by violence deep inside the earth, where heat, pressure, and time tore the ground apart and left behind something almost unrecognizable. Others were carved by water, ice, and wind so slowly that the result feels more like fiction than geology. And a few are so unsettling that even scientists had to rethink what they believed life, matter, and survival could look like. What makes these places even stranger is that they are not empty. In some of them, people still live. They pray there, work there, cross them on foot, pass them on the way home. They have grown up in the shadow of cliffs, volcanoes, frozen lakes, and hidden chambers that look as if they belong on another world. And yet even for them, familiarity has never fully erased the disbelief. Tonight we are traveling through 10 hidden places so extraordinary that locals themselves still stop and stare. We will begin in a place where the earth seems to be tearing itself open. We will descend into worlds buried beneath jungle and rock. We will stand before monuments and landscapes that seem to ignore the normal rules of scale, gravity, and time. And by the end, we will arrive at a discovery so bizarre that it has changed the way scientists think about life itself. Because the deeper you look at this planet, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Earth is not only more beautiful than we imagine, it is far stranger, far more extreme, and in some corners, it still feels unfinished. Danakil Depression, where Earth seems to reject life. Some landscapes feel hostile. Danakil feels unfinished. In northeastern Ethiopia, the ground sinks below sea level, and the Earth begins to look less like a home and more like an exposed wound. This is the Danakil Depression, part of the Afar region, where 3 tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart. It is one of those rare places where geology does not feel distant or abstract. It feels present, active, almost visible in real time. What makes Danakil so unsettling is not just its heat, or its salt, or its colors. It is the sense that the planet is still under construction here. The basin was once connected to ancient seas, and that older history still lingers in the land itself. Vast salt flats stretch across the depression like the remains of an evaporated world. In places, the earth bubbles up into sulfur-stained formations, mineral terraces, and acidic pools so vivid they barely look natural. Bright yellow, rust red, sickly green, the colors are real. That is what makes them disturbing. And yet this is not some empty wasteland that exists only for scientists in satellite images. People have lived with this landscape for centuries. The Afar have mined these salt flats for generations, cutting the crust into neat bars by hand, much as their ancestors did long before trucks, paved roads, or modern machinery reached this part of the Horn of Africa. At Lake As Ale and across the surrounding flats, salt has long been more than a resource. It has been trade, survival, and continuity. In a place that seems designed to push people out, human routine still persists. But routine here has limits. Danakil contains zones that feel almost anti-life. Around Dalal, where volcanic heat rises through thick evaporite deposits, the ground vents gases and feeds brines so chemically extreme that even researchers studying the site have treated it as a test case for the boundaries of life itself. NASA has highlighted Dalal and the wider Danakil region as one of Earth's best analogs for Martian hydrothermal environments. In other words, scientists come here not just to understand Ethiopia, but to ask a larger question. If life can survive in a place like this, where else might it survive? And the answer, strangely, is not always comforting. Because some of Danakil's water-rich zones may be so extreme that even water is not enough. Recent studies of the Dalal complex found hyperacidic, hypersaline brines that appear to be effectively lifeless, despite looking like pools where something ought to live. That is one of the most unnerving details about this region. It forces us to confront a basic assumption we rarely question, that where there is water, there is at least the possibility of life. Danakil suggests that even this rule has exceptions. So when people describe this place as alien, that is not just travel language. It is a serious scientific comparison. Danakil sits at the meeting point of deep time, chemical violence, and human endurance. The Afar do not need a laboratory report to know this land is dangerous. They have always known. They know which stretches can be crossed, which vents must be respected, and which parts of the depression seem to radiate a warning older than language. That knowledge passed through generations may be the most impressive thing here of all. And perhaps that is what gives Danakil its real power on screen. It is not just a place that looks impossible. It is a place that makes us rethink what a landscape can be. Not merely beautiful, not merely deadly, but so extreme that it seems to stand at the edge of the earth we know, staring into another version of it. Doong Cave, the world hidden beneath the jungle. For years, Doong was not a destination. It was a rumor in the forest. In central Vietnam, inside Phong Nha Ke Bang National Park, a local man named Ho Khan came across a dark opening in the jungle in 1990. He heard wind rushing from it. He saw the entrance, and then the forest swallowed it again. Nearly 2 decades passed before he was able to guide a British-Vietnamese cave team back to the site in 2009. What they found was not just another cave. It was the largest known natural cave on Earth by volume, hidden for ages behind jungle, limestone, and chance. That is what gives Doong its power as a story. It was not discovered by satellites or by some giant scientific program. It was found because one man remembered a strange breath coming out of the mountain and refused to let it go. For an American audience, that detail matters. It gives the place a human scale before the scale itself becomes almost impossible to grasp. Doong runs for roughly 9 kilometers, with chambers so vast they can rise around 200 meters high. Its internal volume has been estimated at about 38.5 million cubic meters. This is not a cave you walk into and understand. It is a landscape in its own right. And then the cave becomes stranger still. Doong was formed over millions of years as an underground river cut through limestone beneath the mountains. In parts of the cave, the ceiling later collapsed, opening giant skylights to the world above. Through those openings, sunlight reaches the floor, and where light enters, a second world begins. Jungles have taken root inside the cave. Mist and cloud can gather in the larger chambers. An underground river still moves through the darkness. The result is not the feeling of being underground in any ordinary sense. It feels like stepping into a hidden version of Earth that developed on its own, far from the surface and almost beyond belief. What makes Doong especially effective in a documentary like this is that it does not rely on danger alone. Danakil felt like a place the planet was trying to reject. Doong feels different. It feels withheld, protected, almost secret. Even today, access is tightly controlled. Independent entry is prohibited, and expeditions are limited because the cave's ecosystem and formations are too fragile for mass tourism. That restraint matters. It preserves the sense that this is not a place built for crowds, but a place that still belongs mostly to silence, stone, water, and time. And maybe that is the detail that stays with people most. Not simply that the world's largest cave was found here, in Vietnam in the 21st century, but that it remained hidden for so long at all. We like to think the modern world has mapped everything that matters. Sun Doong quietly disproves that idea. It reminds us that there are still places beneath our feet so vast, so complete, and so self-contained that they can make the surface world feel small. Meteora, monasteries suspended between earth and heaven. There are places that impress you because they are beautiful. Meteora unsettles you first, because it seems unreasonable. In central Greece, towers of sandstone rise abruptly from the plain, some averaging around 1,000 feet high, with others reaching roughly 1,800 feet. Even the name points to the feeling it creates. Meteora comes from a Greek expression meaning suspended in the air. And then you notice what is sitting on top of those rocks. Not lookout posts, not ruins, monasteries, real ones, built in a landscape UNESCO describes as almost inaccessible on what it calls the heavenly columns of Greece. Hermits were already settling here by the 11th century, but in the 14th and 15th centuries, as instability spread through Thessaly, monastic communities began systematically building on the summits themselves. By the end of the 15th century, 24 monasteries had been established in this stone wilderness. That is what makes Meteora so powerful in a film like this. It is not only a geological wonder, it is an argument in stone. A statement about what people will do when they want silence, refuge, and nearness to God badly enough. These monasteries were not placed where life was easy. They were placed where ordinary life could barely follow. Before modern access routes were cut into the rocks, reaching them meant climbing ladders or being hauled up in ropes and nets. Even now, knowing that detail changes the way you look at the walls, the chapels, the cisterns, and the old monastic cells. You stop seeing picturesque buildings and start seeing impossible labor. What deepens the effect is the contrast between the rawness of the setting and the refinement of what was built there. UNESCO notes that Meteora is not just a natural spectacle, but one of those rare places where landscape and human purpose fuse into something larger than either one alone. Its monasteries became important centers of Orthodox life, and their 16th century frescoes marked a major moment in post-Byzantine painting. So when you look up at Meteora, you are not just seeing buildings balanced on cliffs. You are looking at centuries of faith, art, and endurance lifted into the sky. And for an American viewer, that may be the part that lingers most. Sun Doong felt like a hidden world nature kept for itself. Meteora feels different. It feels like a place where people answered the impossible with discipline rather than fear. They looked at those vertical rocks and did not ask whether it could be done. They asked what it would take. That is why Meteora still has such force. Even now, with roads, staircases, and cameras everywhere, it does not feel fully explained. It still feels suspended between geology and belief, between danger and devotion, between the earth below and whatever the monks believed was waiting above. Abraham Lake, the frozen fire beneath the ice. Not every impossible place announces itself with cliffs, volcanoes, or ruins. Some wait in silence. In western Alberta, along the North Saskatchewan River, Abraham Lake looks at first like a winter landscape many Americans think they already understand. Blue ice, mountain light, open cold. The kind of place that feels clean, still, and almost comforting. But Abraham Lake is not a natural lake. It is a man-made reservoir, and every winter it reveals one of the strangest sights in North America. Thousands of white methane bubbles, frozen in layers beneath clear ice like suspended stacks of trapped breath. What makes the scene so unsettling is the contrast. From above, the lake can look elegant, even delicate. But those pale discs under the surface are not decorative patterns. They are methane released when bacteria break down plant matter on the lake bed. Because extra organic material was submerged when the river was dammed, Abraham Lake produces the phenomenon in remarkable abundance. As the lake freezes from the top down, the gas becomes trapped in stages, creating those stacked columns that make the ice look almost architectural. That is why this place works so well in the middle of a film like this. After the furnace of Danakil, the hidden immensity of Doong, and the spiritual audacity of Meteora, Abraham Lake changes the emotional temperature completely. It does not overwhelm you through scale alone. It unsettles you through intimacy. You are not standing far away, looking up at something unreachable. You are standing directly above the phenomenon. Your own reflection is on the ice. The impossible thing is under your feet, and that makes it feel personal. For locals in Alberta, that may be part of what keeps the place strange. This is not some lost corner of the planet hidden deep in jungle or desert. It is a known landscape, a place people return to in winter to skate, walk, and photograph. And still, each season, the lake manages to look like something from another world. Travel Alberta describes it plainly. Methane bubbles get trapped in the ice and create the striking effect Abraham Lake is now famous for. Plain language, but an almost unbelievable result. And beneath that beauty, there is a quieter truth. Methane is not just visually dramatic. It is also a powerful greenhouse gas, which gives the lake a second meaning once you understand what you are seeing. The frozen bubbles are beautiful, yes, but they are also a reminder that even the most photogenic landscapes can be telling a deeper story about decay, chemistry, and a changing planet. That may be what gives Abraham Lake its lasting power. It is not simply a beautiful winter destination. It is a place where nature and engineering accidentally created an image so strange that it feels almost staged. A frozen lake holding pockets of invisible gas in perfect white layers, as if the cold itself had learned how to sculpt. And once you have seen it that way, the ice no longer feels still. It feels like a surface barely containing what lies beneath. Zhangjiajie, the mountains that look invented. Some places do not feel old. They feel unreal. In China's Wulingyuan scenic region, the land rises in thousands of narrow quartz sandstone pillars, many more than 200 meters tall, lifting out of ravines, streams, caves, and natural bridges in a way that can look almost digitally rendered. UNESCO describes the area as being dominated by more than 3,000 such pillars and peaks, which is why first-time visitors so often react the same way. Not with recognition, but with disbelief. What gives Zhangjiajie its peculiar force is the balance between delicacy and scale. These columns were not built upward in a sudden burst. They were left behind. Over immense spans of time, weathering and erosion stripped away softer material and isolated the harder rock into towering vertical forms. The result is not a mountain range in the way most Americans imagine one. It is more like a stone archipelago, a forest of pillars rising out of mist, each one so slim and so sheer that the whole landscape seems to ignore the normal rules of balance. And then the atmosphere changes everything. When cloud and fog move through the valleys, the lower sections of the pillars disappear, leaving only their forested tops suspended above white emptiness. Even local tourism officials lean into that effect, regularly describing the area in terms of seas of cloud and peaks wrapped in mist. That visual quality is one reason the landscape became associated with the floating mountains of Avatar in popular imagination. Even Chinese state media has noted the connection. But the real place is more unsettling than the movie reference, because here the illusion is made not by special effects, but by weather, height, and silence. The human presence around Zhangjiajie adds another layer. This is part of a region deeply tied to Tujia culture in western Hunan, where local traditions, ancestral rites, hand-waving dances, and older Tusi political history still shape how the landscape is remembered and presented. That matters because Zhangjiajie is not just a geological spectacle. It is also a lived cultural world, one where stone, mist, memory, and identity have long existed together. That may be why Zhangjiajie stays with people. Danakil felt like a place Earth was trying to burn clean. Doong felt hidden. Meteora felt ascetic. Abraham Lake felt quietly uncanny. But Zhangjiajie feels as if the planet briefly allowed itself to become dreamlike. It is one of those rare landscapes that makes reality seem less solid than we assumed. As though, under the right light and the right weather, even mountains can start to look like an apparition. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the familiar wonder we still don't fully grasp. The strangest thing about the Great Pyramid is not that it is mysterious, it is that it is so familiar. We have seen it in textbooks, travel ads, films, and documentaries for most of our lives. And yet the closer you get to its actual dimensions, the more ordinary recognition gives way to disbelief. Built for the pharaoh Khufu around the 26th century BCE, the Great Pyramid originally stood about 482 feet tall, covered more than 13 acres at its base, and remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. What makes it so powerful on screen is that Giza does not look hidden in the usual sense. It sits in full view on one of the most famous archaeological sites on Earth. But that visibility can be misleading. Familiarity makes people think they understand it. In reality, the Great Pyramid becomes harder to comprehend the more precise the numbers get. Roughly 2.3 million stone blocks, many averaging around 2.5 tons, assembled with a level of scale and control that still forces modern engineers to speak carefully about how, exactly, the work was organized. The broad outlines are clear. The exact method is still debated. And that is where the real fascination begins. This was not a fantasy structure. It was a royal tomb, built by an ancient state with labor, planning, transport systems, and astonishing discipline. Current scholarship rejects the old movie image of slave armies dragging stones through the desert. Evidence instead points to large workforces of Egyptian laborers and skilled workers, likely organized seasonally and supplied on a massive scale. That does not make the achievement smaller. It makes it more impressive because it roots the pyramid not in myth, but in human coordination on a scale that still feels difficult to picture. Then there is the precision. Britannica notes that the sides measure just over 755 feet each, and that the orientation to the cardinal directions is almost exact. This is where Giza stops feeling merely ancient and starts feeling unnervingly deliberate. Not supernatural, not impossible, but exact enough to remind us that sophistication did not begin with the modern world. The Great Pyramid was built with stone, geometry, manpower, and time. And the result is so refined that even now, in an age of cranes, software, and satellite imaging, it still carries a faint aura of insult toward our assumptions. That may be why this monument belongs here in the middle of the film. Danakil felt like raw planetary violence. Doong felt hidden. Meteora felt devotional. Zhangjiajie felt dreamlike. But Giza does something different. It reminds us that some of the most unbelievable places on Earth are not unbelievable because we have never heard of them. They are unbelievable because we have heard of them for so long that we stop noticing how absurdly extraordinary they really are. And once that realization lands, the pyramid stops looking like a symbol and starts looking like what it has always been. One of the boldest acts of human ambition ever set in stone.
Kawah, Ijen,
the blue fire that hides a harder truth. At first glance, Kawah Ijen looks like the kind of place the modern world would invent with special effects. In East Java, inside the Ijen volcanic complex, blue flames appear along the crater in the dark, not because the lava itself is blue, but because sulfur-rich gases ignite as they escape and burn at very high temperatures. UNESCO describes it as one of Ijen's defining natural phenomena, visible only at night, while National Geographic notes that the effect comes from sulfur combusting on contact with air. That visual spectacle is what draws people in, but the deeper you go into the crater, the more the place changes its character. Beside those flames sits a striking turquoise crater lake that looks almost serene from a distance. It is anything but. Multiple scientific and reference sources describe Kawah Ijen's lake as the world's largest, highly acidic crater lake, with acidity low enough to make its water dangerously corrosive. Britannica goes so far as to compare its acidity to a car battery. And then there are the men who work there. Kawah Ijen is not only a volcanic wonder, it is also the site of one of the most punishing forms of labor still carried out in a place tourists come to photograph. Sulfur miners descend into the crater, break apart cooled sulfur deposits, and carry heavy loads back up steep slopes through air rich in volcanic gases. The Smithsonian/Global Volcanism Program and National Geographic both describe the work as physically brutal and hazardous, with miners hauling large baskets across dangerous terrain while exposed to noxious fumes. More recent environmental health research has also documented sulfur dioxide exposure there as a serious risk to eyes, skin, and the respiratory system. That contrast is what makes Kawah Ijen so strong in a film like this. On the surface, it is one of the most visually surreal places on Earth. Blue fire, glowing sulfur, a crater lake the color of polished stone. But underneath that beauty is something much harder: chemistry, heat, toxic gas, and a human economy built around enduring all of it. It is a place where wonder and hardship occupy the same frame. And maybe that is why Kawah Ijen stays with people. Not because it is simply beautiful, and not because it is merely dangerous, but because it reveals how often the most extraordinary landscapes are also the least forgiving. From far away, it looks like fantasy. Up close, it feels like the earth reminding us that beauty can burn. Vatnajökull Glacier, where fire breathes beneath the ice. Most glaciers suggest stillness. Vatnajökull does not. In Iceland, this vast ice cap spreads across a landscape that UNESCO describes as one of the world's clearest expressions of fire and ice. A place where rift systems, volcanoes, meltwater, and ice are all still actively shaping the land. The protected area around it covers more than 1.4 million hectares, nearly 14% of Iceland, and includes 10 central volcanoes, 8 of them subglacial. In other words, this is not simply a glacier lying over old mountains. It is ice resting on top of a restless engine. That is what gives Vatnajökull its strange emotional force. From a distance, it can look serene, a white mass stretched across the highlands, cold, silent, almost permanent. But permanence here is an illusion. Beneath the ice, volcanic systems continue to generate heat, pressure, and rupture. When that buried energy breaks through, it can trigger one of Iceland's most dramatic phenomena, the Jökullaup, a sudden glacial outburst flood. UNESCO and Vatnajökull National Park both describe these floods as among the most spectacular consequences of the interaction between volcanoes and ice, capable of reshaping plains, river systems, and canyons in violent bursts. That contrast is what makes this place so powerful in a film like this. Danakil felt as if the earth had been torn open. Doong felt hidden. Meteora felt suspended between faith and gravity. But Vatnajökull feels unstable in a quieter, more unsettling way. It is beautiful on the surface and dangerous underneath, not because it looks threatening every day, but because so much of its force remains concealed until the landscape suddenly changes. The Icelandic Meteorological Office has repeatedly tracked Jökullaups from the Grímsvötn system beneath Vatnajökull, including documented flood events in both 2022 and 2024. And then there are the ice caves. Along the glacier's margins, seasonal meltwater can carve tunnels and chambers through the ice, leaving behind glowing blue interiors that look almost too perfect to be natural. But even these are part of the same lesson. They are temporary. They shift, weaken, and collapse as conditions change. A cave that seems timeless in winter may be gone by the end of the season. So even Vatnajökull's beauty carries the same underlying message as its floods. Nothing here is ever truly fixed. That is the deeper character of the place. Not frozen permanence, but constant negotiation between heat and cold, pressure and release, solidity and collapse. For people living with this glacier, that tension is part of daily reality. Vatnajökull brings water, tourism, and some of Iceland's most astonishing scenery. But it also sits over systems powerful enough to transform the land with little warning. That is why it belongs on this list. Not just because it is beautiful, and not only because it is extreme, but because it reveals something easy to forget. Even ice can be deceptive. Sometimes what looks most still is only the surface of something far more alive. Angel Falls, the waterfall that seems to fall out of the sky. Some wonders do not rise from the earth. They seem to descend from somewhere beyond it. Deep in southeastern Venezuela, inside Canaima National Park, Angel Falls drops from the edge of Auyan Tepuy, one of the great table mountains of the Guiana Highlands. Britannica lists the total height at 3,212 feet, making it the highest waterfall in the world, while UNESCO describes Canaima itself as a landscape of sheer cliffs, tepuys, and waterfalls on an almost mythic scale. What gives the falls their strange emotional power is not just height, but the way that height changes the water itself. Angel Falls does not pour downward in one neat ribbon like the waterfalls most people picture. It leaps from the flat-topped summit and seems to lose its solidity on the way down, breaking into mist and drift before it ever fully reaches the world below. Britannica puts it simply, the water barely makes contact with the cliff face. That small detail is what makes the whole scene feel so unreal, as if the mountain is too high for water to remain water. And then there is the mountain behind it. Auyan Tepuy, often rendered as Devil's Mountain, is part of one of the oldest geological landscapes on Earth. UNESCO describes the tepuys of Canaima as a unique biogeological world of immense geological value, with roughly 65% of the park covered by these table mountains. That matters because Angel Falls is not just a beautiful drop of water. It belongs to a much older, stranger setting, a lost world landscape of isolated summits, vertical walls, and ecological separation that makes the whole region feel cut off from ordinary time. The story most outsiders know is tied to an American pilot. Britannica notes that the falls were first sighted by outsiders in the 1930s and later named for James Angel, who crash-landed his plane on a nearby mesa in 1937. But the place was not unknown in any absolute sense. Britannica also records indigenous names such as Karipakupai Meru, and National Geographic has used Karipakupai Vena alongside Angel Falls, a reminder that the waterfall belonged to indigenous memory long before it entered the modern global imagination. That tension gives the place its deeper resonance. To much of the outside world, Angel Falls arrived as a revelation, a spectacular discovery at the edge of the map. But to the people who had lived around these mountains, It was part of an older reality, one framed not by aviation or headlines, but by a landscape already understood as spiritually charged, remote, and powerful. The modern name made the waterfall famous. It did not make it real. And maybe that is why Angel Falls belongs so close to the end of this film. It does not feel engineered, survivable, or even fully approachable. It feels distant in the oldest sense of the word, not merely far away, but removed from the scale of ordinary human life. By the time you see it clearly, you understand that the shock is not just that such a waterfall exists. It is that a place this immense, this ancient, and this visually improbable has been on Earth all along, falling out of the sky while most of the world went on as if landscapes still made sense. Movile Cave, the sealed world that rewrote the rules of life. By the time you reach Movile Cave, the question is no longer how strange Earth can look. It is how strange life itself can become. Near Mangalia in southeastern Romania, Movile Cave was discovered in 1986 during investigations connected to a construction project. And what scientists found inside was not simply an unusual cave, but a sealed ecosystem unlike anything previously known on land. Research describes it as a subterranean world cut off from the surface for around 5 million years, sustained not by sunlight, but by chemosynthesis, life built on chemical energy rather than photosynthesis. That one fact changes the emotional weight of the entire place. Every landscape we have seen so far, Danakil, Doong, Meteora, Zhangjiajie, Giza, Kawah, Ijen, Vatnajökull, Angel Falls, still belonged, in one way or another, to the surface world we know. Movile does not. Its air is oxygen-poor and rich in gases such as hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, and methane, and some chambers have been measured at roughly 7% oxygen, far below normal atmospheric conditions. This is not a place that merely feels hostile. It is a place whose basic chemistry seems to belong to another version of Earth. And yet life did not just persist here, it specialized. Studies of Movile Cave describe a food web built from sulfur and methane oxidizing microbes, with those microorganisms forming the base of an ecosystem that supports fungi and cave-adapted invertebrates. Scientists have continued finding highly specialized organisms there, and recent taxonomic work noted that the number of endemic species known from Movile had reached 35, placing it among the most species-rich caves on Earth for endemic fauna. That is what makes Movile Cave such a powerful ending for this film. Angel Falls made the world feel ancient and remote. Movile makes it feel fundamentally unfinished. It suggests that evolution does not need beauty, sunlight, or even familiar air to keep experimenting. In darkness, in sulfur, in confinement, life kept going anyway, quietly, blindly, and on terms completely different from the ones that shaped most of the living world above. Recent reviews describe the cave as an important analog for studying the limits of life and for thinking about subsurface habitats beyond Earth. And perhaps that is the most unsettling thought of all. For millions of years, while civilizations rose and fell on the surface, this hidden world continued below, separate, self-contained, and almost untouched by everything we call history. Not because it was mythical, not because it was impossible, but because it was sealed away long enough for life to invent a different answer to the same question. How do we survive here? When a place like that exists beneath an ordinary patch of ground, the planet stops feeling fully known. And that, more than anything else in this countdown, may be the real shock. We have not reached the edge of Earth's imagination. We may only have found one more door into it. And maybe that is the quiet truth running through all of these places. The world is not finished becoming itself. We live as if the map is complete, as if the boundaries of the Earth are settled explained, and safely folded into names, coordinates, and satellite images. But places like these remind us that reality is still far more unruly than our descriptions of it. There are landscapes that look impossible, ecosystems that should not function, and structures that still seem to exceed the confidence of our explanations. Some of them were shaped by violence, some by patience, some by faith, and some by forms of life so strange that they force us to rethink what life even is. But all of them point to the same humbling conclusion. This planet is older, deeper, and more inventive than we are. And perhaps that is why these hidden places stay with us, not simply because they are beautiful or dangerous or hard to reach, but because they return us to a feeling modern life rarely allows. The feeling of standing before something real and still not fully understanding it. And maybe that is not a failure of knowledge. Maybe it is part of the wonder.